Welcome to your Active Tech Brief podcast. My name is Luca Bertuzzi, your technology editor. This week we take a closer look at the GDPR enforcement with a person that played a key role in the first 5 years of the data protection law. For an overview on all things technology in the EU, sign up to our free newsletter or visit the website youractive.com. This is Your Active's Tech Brief podcast. Today I'm joined by Andrea Jelinek, Chair of the European Data Protection Board. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Luca.
So, Andrea, you have been chair of the EDPB for the first 5 years of the GDPR, the European Data Protection Rulebook. What would you say are the main results of your term?
I think one of the main results is that the European Data Protection Board, which was a brand new European body at the 25th of May 2018, evolved as a player, meanwhile, on the European field, because our tasks to look after the compliance regarding the GDPR, how the GDPR is interpreted in all the EEA countries, was filled quite well.
You had, I guess, a lot of work to do since it was the first years that the GDPR came to life, into streamlining the work of data protection authorities across the EU. Where do you think you did the best job so far into bringing this sort of common understanding?
I think it was really an interesting phase because, as you know, there has already been the Working Party 29, but the Working Party 29 was just an advisory body to the Commission, but it was easier for all of us to start the cooperation because we didn't start it from scratch because we already knew each other. The data protection authorities already gave guidance. We had opinions and guidelines which were endorsed on the 25th of May. And this made our life easier because we knew how cooperation could work. And as a new body which had started to have this decisive powers, it's really important to know each other and how to cooperate on a personal level and later on also on a remotely level. And I think this was extremely important because if you're new on the scene, you have to establish your own rules because there was nothing before like that. So we had our rules of procedures for the EDPB and how we are going to act. And when we started, we planned to have about 10 meetings a year for the plenary meetings a year. But now, until yesterday, we had our 79th plenary meeting, which shows how the workload improved, but also how the cooperation improved because we met sometimes once a week remotely or ordinarily once a month. So with the involvement of the board, also the cooperation got closer. We had, I think, thousands expert subgroup meetings during the last 5 years, which means a lot of workload, but also a lot of results.
Taking a more critical view, there have also been voices saying that GDPR enforcement is going too slowly, especially on big tech companies. There are bottlenecks in certain member states that have a workload to go through, but that it's a workload that is particularly important for the entire single market. So how do you respond to those that say that the GDPR is still to show its full potential and that more should be done?
The GDPR has still to show its full potential, and we try to unlock it. But I want to start at the beginning, because first of all, when we started our work, it was clear it has to be guidance at first, guidance and opinions on legal questions, And until now, we gave about 43 guidelines, and there were, I don't know how many opinions at the moment, but and 6 recommendations. But the point is, we moved from guidance to the enforcement, and also the supervisory authority, because enforcement is still, and it is agreed by the legislator, by the national supervisory authorities. Also, this enforcement got speed. During the last 2 years, I think about 1.2 billion euros were issued as fines by the national supervisory authorities, which is not so little. And you mustn't forget the GDPR entered into application 5 years ago, and you have to, if you have complaints, you have to investigate very thoroughly, and there's no use if you make quick decisions which are not going to stand in front of the court.
From a regulator perspective, 5 years, it's not a lot. From a civil society perspective, perhaps that's too long. So there are also different points of view there. But you just mentioned that we are moving away from guidelines toward more enforcement, and indeed we have seen a more prominent role of the EDPB, especially in terms of the dispute resolution mechanism for cross-border cases. So do you think that in the next mandate what we will see is more and more of these binding decisions by the board and less guidance, or is there still guidance that needs to be done, because at one point you will finish all the topics, right?
There is always need for guidance, it's quite clear, but the point is, as you mentioned, the enforcement, you mustn't forget we had more than 2,000 cross-border cases during the last 5 years. 711 are already decided, and only 8 of them were decided in the dispute resolution mechanism, the Article 65 decisions. That means more than 99% of the cross-border cases are decided without tackling the Article 65. That means even if there were relevant and reasoned objections by other supervisory authorities, they were ironed out and there were no Article 65 procedure. In the last years, we had to decide on 8 Article 65 files. We had to adopt the decisions with a very short time frame of 2 months, which we always met, and I think this is quite well done. And you mustn't forget, the decision of the EDPB is not a decision towards a controller, it's a decision towards the lead supervisory authority, and the lead supervisory authority has to implement the decision of the EDPB in its final decision.
So yeah, there are a few elements to unpack there. I would like to start with what you said about the timeline, because that, of course, will become more and more challenging if you have more open cases. We have seen a letter from the EDPS to the Commission about the budget. So, what is the risk of not having enough resources to meet all of these deadlines?
I'm very grateful that the EDPS, who is providing the secretariat for the EDPP, is also trying to get together with the EDPP the resources to have more staff. We have already increased our staff at the secretariat level, and also the supervisory authorities at national level have increased their staff. But it's never enough. But I'm sure that if more staff is needed to be compliant with the duties of the EDPP within the GDPR, we are getting the stuff we're going to need.
Moving on, you have also penned a letter to the Commission mentioning some aspects of national procedural law that needs to be harmonized at the EU level. There seems to be a response from the Commission, which has picked up the idea. So what should be the priorities in this harmonization, besides you have presented quite a long shopping list, but what are like the key points that the Commission needs to get right in this proposal, and what are the potential pitfalls?
Thanks for this question. I think this is really important because this wish list was one of the results of a summit we had in Vienna last April. At this meeting, we decided to even closer cooperate, to cooperate on specific strategic cases, and also to send a wish list to the Commission to unfold the full beauty and to unlock the full beauty of the GDPR. The Commission took this wish list on its program for 2023, and I'm really grateful to Commissioner Reinders and his team that they took this, because it's really important to have some obstacles ironed out regarding the differences in administrative procedure laws. And I'm sure that the proposal of the Commission will help us to cooperate even closer, and we will have the opportunity to make not only decisions in due time, but to facilitate our cooperation.
Besides this harmonization, do you think that once it's done and dusted, the overall architecture of the GDPR enforcement will be completed, or do you subscribe to calls that we have heard about the GDPR having been to reopened for discussion in the next term?
I fully disagree with those who want to reopen the GDPR, because I think it works. Not only the enforcement part is working, also the rest is working, because as you have seen during the last years, many countries are issuing data protection laws which are similar to the GDPR, and all the companies all around the world who want to make business in Europe try to be GDPR compliant. So there's no use to change anything if everybody is trying to be compliant. That's one of the points. The second point is there are already, I think, about more than 20 cases pending before the European Court of Justice, which is our highest court for the European Union. And then these cases are going to be decided by the European Court of Justice, and there is even more clarity as it is now. So there's no use to change anything that is working, that the court is going to decide upon, and what would be the consequence? A legis vacans for maybe, or postponement for maybe 10 years. That's not for the good of the data protection of the fundamental right of the European citizens to have this interregnum or nothing in between. I think it's really important that we stick to the GDPR, that we listen what the court is going to tell us, and that the Secretariat and the supervisory authorities are equipped with the stuff they need to fulfill their tasks they have according to the Charter of the Fundamental Rights in Europe.
I wanted to move on artificial intelligence, in particular ChatGPT, because of course we have seen the EDPB has launched a task force on the privacy challenges posed by generative AI and ChatGPT in particular. So first of all, what is the purpose of this task force? What are you hoping to achieve?
We created this task force. It was on the 14th of April. The task force is here to exchange information and to foster cooperation. And it had already its first meeting last week, and it will have meeting, I think, this week or next week. And as it is an internal discussion, I can't disclose anything to you at the moment.
I see, but I guess that is something you can discuss more openly in terms of the practical difficulties that DPAs are facing when regulating these sort of large language models, for instance, in terms of training data, what happens with the data of a user once they provide an input. So how how ready are DPAs to enforce data protection rules into these disruptive technologies?
Before we are enforcing, we are always investigating. And at the level of investigation, we have to not only investigate what the companies are doing, we have to cooperate with maybe a complainant, or we do it on own ex officio, on own volition, that we are investigating. And this takes time. And I think we are ready because we have to be ready.
No, I'm asking the question also because I know that some national authorities are positioning themselves to become the enforcers of the Artificial Intelligence Act that is currently still in negotiation phase. Talking about the CNIL in France, but there are others, of course. So how mature is that discussion into understanding the privacy concerns that are behind this technology? And I think that perhaps the Italian DPA decision on ChatGPT could provide some input for that.
We were already involved in the discussion on the AI Act, and we already issued a common opinion with the ETPS in April 2022, I think, to be very vigilant, and we were quite critical. And meanwhile, the AI Act is very prominent and is very prominent discussed, because 1 year ago the interest of the greater audience was not so big, but now it's for sure. It is the AI is the new elephant in the room, a specific generative AI. And I think it's really important to stay on top of the discussion and to be included in the discussion.
So OpenAI, the provider of ChatGPT, does not have a legal representative in the EU. Does that pose a challenge, since that means that you cannot trigger the one-stop shop mechanism, and basically means that every national DPA can do its own thing? So how do you see, because I don't think that was the structure that was envisaged under the GDPR.
The company can envisage up to 30 investigations. I think it's also an interesting approach if the company is facing maybe 30 investigations. I don't predict that there will be 30 investigations, but this could happen. And these national investigations are on the own of the supervisory authority. But we created this task force to exchange our point of views.
So we have heard 3 official candidates for the next term to take your post. I don't expect you to endorse any of them, but well, maybe you'll surprise me. But more than anything, I would like to ask you if you have any suggestion for the person that will pick up your role.
You're right. I don't surprise you. You're really, really right. Just one suggestion is be confident in your colleagues, cooperate with them, and you will be carried by them, because they represent the Ivy League of data protection.
Andrea Jelinek is chair of the European Data Protection Board. Thank you, Andrea.
It was a pleasure.
That's all we got time for this week. Don't forget to sign up to our free Tech Brief newsletter to stay on top of tech news and digital policy developments in the EU and beyond. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, published on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. This episode was produced with the technical help of Avi Chiori. I'm your Luca Bertuzzi, and thank you for listening.